Hi, good morning. This video is for my US1 classes. We are discussing slavery still. We're going to talk about something called the Amistad. The Amistad is a slave ship that was where the slaves revolted, got free, and took over the ship. Eventually, they were caught by an American naval vessel and were put on trial for the murders of their captives in the United States. There's a reading posted on Encourse. I'm going to read that to you now. I thought that would be a little better since you guys are used to me reading stuff to you in class. I thought maybe we'd get a little bit more response if we do that here now. So this is called the Amistad trial in 1841. And I will read this to you, and then you can go over it and answer the questions after it. As we do with any reading we do, we always have questions. So, one of the most famous slave revolts in the world was upon the Amistad, July 2nd, 1839. Something that's a little ironic about the Amistad, the word Amistad means friendship in Spanish, but it was actually a slave ship. What occurred had shocked the slave trade world, as there had been several slave uprisings, but it had rarely been achieved before with such success and notoriety. 53 American slaves aboard the Amistad that were illegally purchased broke their chains and set out to take over the ship. They crept upon 2 crew members and killed them, as others abandoned ship in a small boat. Remember that this is a Spanish ship. The Spanish had already outlawed slavery, so the sale of these slaves from Africa was illegal. The way they tried to get around it was that they said that they were born in the Caribbean islands and they were being bought to other places. But during the trial, it is found out that they actually do come from Africa, which was illegal. The escaped slaves were so quick to seize the Amistad that the rest of the crew did not have time to load their guns and ended up disarming the rest of the crew. After taking control of the ship, they planned to sail back to their homeland in Sierra Leone, but they needed help as they did not know the sea, and asked the surviving crew members to help them in exchange for sparing their lives. The crew agreed, but ended up tricking the escaped slaves. Instead of sailing east back to Africa, they sailed north and then west for some 1,400 miles. During this time, several slaves became sick and died of dysentery and dehydration. The ship ended up along the United States coast, where it was intercepted by the United States Navy. Now, what actually happened is they would sail during the day towards Africa, because the slaves knew that in Africa the sun came up in a certain way, so they could sail by the sun, and they knew which way they were going. At night, the people that were driving the ship for them would turn back east towards America, because if they knew they were caught by the American Navy, that they would be saved, and then they would be the slaves would be put on trial. And then before the sun came up, they would turn back towards Africa to fool the slaves. The Spanish crew was freed once the slaves were imprisoned in Connecticut. The slaves were charged with murder for killing the cook and the captain of the Amistad. The Spaniards demanded the return of the slaves, claiming that they were their property. The slave trade was outlawed in 1808 in the United States, but slavery still existed throughout the country. Unlike New York, Connecticut was still a slave state, but had a lot of abolitionists. The abolitionists pushed for a trial to determine the slaves' fate. Remember, abolitionists meant people that wanted to abolish slavery or get rid of it. The president at the time, Martin Van Buren, was in favor of sending the slaves back to Cuba, but the court stepped in and put the slaves on trial. Former President John Quincy Adams represented the slaves and made the case made it all the way to the Supreme Court. He argued for over 9 hours to get the court to free the imprisoned slaves. The Spaniards argued that there was an anti-piracy treaty with the United States, and the slaves and ships should be returned to them. After 18 months in prison, the slaves were finally free when the Supreme Court sided with the Africans. The court stated that the Africans were born free and therefore were free men. Abolitionists raised money to send the freed slaves back to Sierra Leone, and the U.S. Navy was granted salvage rights to the seized Spanish ship. To make matters even better for the freed Africans, they learned that the British had destroyed the slave carriers' base of operations in the surprise raid. The Africans returned to Africa with a few missionaries. A few stayed and lived with the missionaries, but most ran off to their families and never be seen again. Now, if we were in school, there is a movie, a very good movie called The Amistad, which shows all this. If we do return to school at any point, we will watch the movie and we'll discuss how what happened on the ship and the trial. Please remember going forward that we are doing things on OnCourse. Make sure you hand things in on OnCourse, not emailing them to me in a Google Doc. OnCourse is a platform I am using. I'm going to, I would think, within the next year or two, that OnCourse will be the district's platform for virtual learning, not Google. So try to get used to it. Only because that's the vibe I'm getting from the district, that OnCourse will be the way we're going to go eventually. Not right now, but I am trying to do it now, so use it now so we all know it and can work with it better. Any questions, please message me on the message board on OnCourse. If not, have a great day, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.